get it to him. I know he's in the market.
Not that I'm so genius.
Not all the same.
There's gonna be more than this. What was it? Oh yeah.
Oh, it's Westminster Avenue. That's the third.
Third, yeah. We'll see there on the third. My brother's wedding. That's fine. Here's the copy.
It's actually true.
Has
So apparently, despite my best efforts, I seem to be the person designated as in charge of this. I'm Kimberly Chastain. I'm the pastor of Binghamton United Presbyterian Church, and I'm glad to see you all here. It's a real treat for us to have Reverend Liz and Noam here and their team. The things I need to tell you: if you need to go out in case of a fire, there are exits at the back, 2 doors in the front, and go to either end of the hallway, right, Becky? There are 3 bathrooms. I believe at the moment one is designated as men, one is designated as women, and one is designated as everybody. The everybody one is handicap accessible and has a changing table in it. Shout out to co-sponsors, key partners, and movement leaders in this space. Pretty much everybody here is a co-sponsor, a key partner, or a movement leader. We're glad you're all here. Sponsors include Binghamton University Interfaith Council, Binghamton University Department of Religion, Broome County Interfaith, Broome County Council of Churches, Broome Tioga NAACP, CARES Advocates, Just, and Walk With Me as a subcategory of Just, and Riot Act Books as a subcategory of Just, Union Endicott Presbyterian Church, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Binghamton, Southern Door Community Land Trust. Did I get everybody? I hope so. And then there's the other co-conspirators that need to be mentioned, because part of what we're talking about here is not only political resistance, but also stopping hemorrhaging socially and also building for a future. And so we've got Vines that does urban gardening, that has been a part of the work in Binghamton for many years, American Civic Association, the YWCA, ACBC, Citizen Action, Indivisible, Southern Tier Voices of Power, Family Enrichment Network. We also wanted to remember Larry Parham tonight. It is his birthday. And he was a powerful influence and important member of our community for so many years, and we still miss him. We are on land that was occupied by the Iroquois Confederacy until after the American Revolutionary War. The Iroquois sided with the British, and that gave the conquerors the opportunity to, and the pretext for stripping people of their land. The Iroquois continue, the Haudenosaunee continue as the 7 nations and are thriving and taking back some of what was taken from them, and we're grateful. I also learned, and I'd like to say this when we get together to talk about the justice issues, for particularly in Binghamton, because did you know that Binghamton from its very beginning had an absentee landlord? William Bingham brought this property in 1784 and never set foot in the place, divided up plots on a map, and sold it to other people who never set foot in the place either. And that's our heritage. Doesn't that make sense of an awful lot of stuff? Anyway, I thought we could begin this evening, though, by using some of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, and the response that you all need to give back to me at the end of every paragraph is, "Now our minds are one." Try that. Now our minds are one. Today we have gathered, and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. We are all thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of the time. To our Mother we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the Spirit of water. Now our minds are one. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We are honored by them when they give up their lives so that we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and in the water and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now our minds are one. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day, without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. We put our minds together to give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now our minds are one. Now we turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on this Mother Earth. For the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now our minds are one. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. Now, our minds are one. And I'd like to introduce Pastor Micah Barrero, who is going to focus us a little bit by singing for us Lift Every Voice. And I told him I was going to say y'all could sing along, and he said, well, if they've got the green hymnal and they need the words, it's 729. I don't know what the blue hymnal is. 563.
Good evening, everyone. As Pastor said, my name's Micah Barrero, and I'll be singing hymn 729 in the green hymnal or 563 in the blue. Its title is Lift Every Voice and Sing, and many people know it as the Black national anthem used by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have now our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, let us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Kirk-Barrero from Broome Tioga NAACP. Just wanted to share a few thoughts as we move forward in this movement and embrace all the things we have learned thus far. Jim Crow was held up with thousands of myths telling people why black and whites could not share life together. Many of them had personal experiences that tells them those things, those myths were lies. But the lynching trees and Bull Connor and his dogs were symbols of threat that said, you better comply. In the 60s, Martin Luther King had mentioned, we spend $500,000 for every one Vietnam soldier killed. At the same time, we were spending $53 for anti-poverty programs. I don't have exact numbers for this year, but if you look it up like I did, they say they plan to spend significantly more on military services than on anti-poverty programs, and we are not at war. People of many backgrounds have come to realize our problems are similar, and that these problems may be addressed by us working together. So who suffers from poverty? BIPOC people, people with English as a second language, disabled Americans, children, and that's just a few. we gave respect to the indigenous people who owned this land. They are 25.4% of poverty. 1/4 of them are living in poverty when we are prospering on their grounds. And you think of society and how that affects, the poverty affects us individually. So it's no surprise that indigenous people suffer from high levels of domestic violence, alcoholism, and diabetes. This is what poverty can do to an individual, to a family, to a body. I want to shout out, what percentage, what's the ratio do you think of people living in poverty in America right now? Somebody? It's 1 in 6. 1 in 6 people. Look at this room. 1 in 6 people. How many are suffering in that way? The percentage, the number of people, do you think it's about 10 million? 36.8. 36.8 people every day are living in poverty, suffering all the effects that poverty brings upon a family, a person, a community. The poverty threshold listed by the government is $32,150. Think about that. Child poverty rate is 15.3. And poverty goes even further when it's compared to sexual orientation, gender, and race. Somebody raise their hand and tell me who they think are the 2 groups that are 29% in poverty. Ms. Beck. See, we're talking about gender, and it is trans adults and cisgender bisexual women, not the men, the women. Do we think that's just an accident, or do we think there's some hate and bias going on? It's been documented that connectivity between economic disparities and participatory citizenship, and I got that word out right, I thought I was going to stumble over it, participatory citizenship, it's great. Does that make sense? Because if you're home hungry, you could care less what's going on in City Hall. So you're not getting out here, you're not getting in your community groups, you're not fighting for your rights. You're trying to feed yourself and your children. So why do we need this movement? Poverty's not new. So why put our time, attention, and show up here tonight for this? I'm going to just mention 7 things that I believe, and I bet each one of you could match those 7. 1, executive orders to create fear and undermine the Constitution. So we need this movement to get us motivated so we can come out and vote and get the right people in office that will make laws and things to support the people that are coming up, the poor people, the ones that really need the most. The dehumanization of humans. What we want is employment and training opportunities, not below poverty level welfare. We don't want that. That's what we have to settle for. They're making people justify their existence, which has roots in racism and fascism. And they want to put across the screen and the TV like, this is all about transgender women using the bathroom and protecting our children. But that's not where it lies. That's not the end of it. This involves neurodivergent young adults and children. This involves learning disorders. This involves physical challenges. It's a lot more behind the DEI than they want us to be, because they want us to be less humane. Dismantling of the education system, and I don't need to say anything more than that because I know you all got that. We need to improve and provide low-income housing. This is something that should have been worked on for years and years. They do all the statistics. They knew the growth patterns. They knew this year how many people would be here and how many people needed a place to live, but they didn't do the work to provide for that. We got to change City Hall. We got to change all levels of government so that they will vote in the way that supports the people that live in this community. The ideology of white supremacy. I'll leave that one there. 7, ensuring a livable income for all, a livable wage. So right now, our neighbors, Pennsylvania, not 15 minutes away, the minimum wage is $7.25. In New York, we do better. We got 15.5. 15.5, 40 hours a week is 241. Anybody recall the poverty level? There you go, $90 difference. We deserve better than that. I despise the way they use Christian nationalism as an attempt to claim that they're moral, that they're fighting immoral behaviors and this and that. Who am I to judge? Nobody walking, right? So they can't say what's moral, immoral, and they can't label people, or they should not be labeling people, and we should be fighting against those who want to. You don't have to be a Christian or not even particularly religious to know what they're doing is immoral, and to know that we have sunk to a very low place where people can be snatched off the street, end up in El Salvador, like the lynching trees of the Old South. These public and brutal actions are designed to inspire fear in us so that we'll comply. But I'll say no. I will not comply. And I hope you will join me in that thought. Come to the aid of humanity. Thank you.
So, there are people that have been working on these issues for a long, long time. There are people who are new to the movement, and there are a lot of us that are kind of making it up as we go. But the point of being here tonight is to hear from the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis and her co-author Noam Sandweiss-Back. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is an anti-poverty activist, a pastor, a theologian, and an author. She is the executive director of the Kairos Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice, which I think used to be the Labor Religion Coalition.
Well, it's now, the Labor Religion Coalition is now a program of Kairos. They're connected.
Anyway, she's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. The last time she was here in Binghamton in this spot, she was here with Reverend Dr. William Barber, and they launched the New York State Poor People's Campaign in this space, so it's a real honor to have them back. Noam Sandweiss-Back is an organizer and writer born in Jerusalem and raised in New Jersey, who has spent a decade working among poor and low-income communities, including with the Kairos Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice and the Poor People's Campaign. So we're awfully glad you're here. My understanding is that the setup means that we need you to come up on the stage because the mics are hot up here. So I'm going to go sit back down. We'll let you do your thing, and then we'll follow the runner show.
Good evening. that. I'll turn it off so it doesn't. All right, you can hear me fine now, right? Oh. Okay, I don't. Anyways, good evening. We were Noam and I were saying to each other with this amazing opening that the work is done here. Because it paints this picture of abandonment amidst abundance, poverty amid plenty, and all of the inequities of our society as they play out here in Binghamton that just don't need to be. It does not have to be this way. We can indeed do better. So we're really excited and honored to get to a chance to talk, share a little bit about this book. You only get what you're organized to take, lessons from the movement to end poverty. It chronicles about 30 years of organizing that poor and unhoused and dispossessed and low-income folk have been doing, and pulls and culls some of the lessons of that work. And then I think tries to call people into action, to say, especially in a moment like this, when 15 trucks of food are stopped because the USDA decides they need to cut somewhere, or 40% of people in the Binghamton area are living, without what we need, or 80 to 90 new folk have joined the ranks of the imprisoned and detained through ICE just in the last month or so. I mean, these are not issues that are far away or distant or kind of ephemeral. They're the crises that beset our society. And what are we going to do? I think I am a Presbyterian pastor, so it's amazing to be in United Presbyterian Church. I'm a theologian and love the Bible. And I've been spending the last 30 years of my life organizing amongst some of the poorest people in this country. And I think about, the kind of beginning of Luke's gospel, where after Mary has cried out and sung because being pregnant with Jesus, she's heard and realized that the rich and powerful are going to be torn down from their thrones, and the poor are going to be lifted up. After we hear about kind of some of the early organizing, we get into the wilderness with John the Baptizer, and the question is posed, what then shall we do? And I think that is the question of the moment, what then shall we do? And I think what we want to suggest in the stories that we tell in this book and in the organizing experiences of many people in this room and across the state and across other states in this country, that there are real lessons. There are real programs and policies that need to be set forth, and that mostly we need to build up a power to make the power structure say yes, as Dr. King said, instead of when they may be desirous of saying no. So hoping that folk here get a hold of this book, or just even read other articles and engage in the conversation we're having this evening, but want to put before you that in a moment that is defined by crisis after crisis, the potential of the ending of Medicaid and SNAP, the potential of ending Head Start, the kind of being on the verge of a recession that could then turn actually very well into a depression, on top of the fact that we're already living in a society where we throw out more food than it takes to feed every person that's not hungry just in this country but across the world. And yet about half of kids in the US are living in food insecure homes, right? I mean, that's what was going on before these latest cuts. That was what's going on, before these latest attacks. And I think what we have learned and what we see throughout and tried to tell throughout the pages of this book and many others of grassroots leaders is that the problems of poverty and the decline of democracy, the issues of systemic racism and the kind of pitting of communities against each other will not be solved by one program or one policy. Those problems are not about pleading to just those in power to pass one or two measures that help some group of people. That what it's going to take and what it has taken before and will take again is for a united movement, a social movement that involves people and welcomes people from all walks of life, but is led by those that are most impacted to bring poverty to its end. And I think those are hard. That's like a hard concept to talk about in this moment. I mean, like, are we really suggesting, amidst all of the attacks, amidst all the hate, amidst all of the stats that we've already heard, that we can actually end poverty? And I think what our answer is a resounding yes. That we do not have scarcity. All we have is a scarcity of political will and moral consciousness to actually get the job done. So I might pass this to my colleague and co-author, Noam, and then I think we're welcoming and excited to be a part of a larger conversation with folks. But I wanted to first have you share some thoughts.
Great. Hey, good evening, everyone. So maybe I'll share a few thoughts, and then the great thing about being a co-author with Reverend Liz is I get to learn with her along many years, and also maybe I think I'll just throw one or two questions your way. And I've learned a lot, through hearing the stories of Reverend Liz's 30+ years of very grassroots anti-poverty organizing, really through some of the most significant poor people's movements of the last 30 years. This point on that we are living in a time of objective abundance. We often say, and in the book we write, we live in a time of poverty amid plenty, of abundance amid mass abandonment. Alongside those stats that we heard today, from the bottom of society are the stats that we hear or should be hearing from the top of society. 3 people in this country, 3 men, collectively have $500 billion in wealth. The GDP of this nation is, what is it now, $23 trillion. The nation spends over $700 billion a year on its war budget, on the war economy. As we were hearing those stats from 50+ years ago. Like the objective abundance is just undeniable. And actually what we saw a few years ago during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic is that when there is the political will to move that abundance in the direction of uplifting society, like it's possible not in the future, it's possible tomorrow. I mean, in the first year of the pandemic, we had a whole suite of really significant policies that were put in place. They were temporary policies, but they offered a glimpse, a window into what could be possible on the other side of poverty and mass economic inequality and the neoliberalism that has dominated American policymaking on both the right and the left, Democrats and Republicans for the last 50 years. We saw moratoriums on evictions. We saw moratoriums on student debt payments. We saw Medicaid cuts being paused for an extended period of time. We saw the child tax credit expanded for a year, and in just that year, the greatest increase in children being lifted out of poverty in American history. I mean, what are the lessons from that year? When you house people, when you feed people, when you clothe people, when you give people education and health care, the results are immediate and astounding. And what happens on the other side of it, of that first year of the pandemic, is those short-term, gains are taken right back, the second the pandemic is over. And so one really important lesson I think we, drew from that experience is, concessions won from those in power can just as easily be taken away if we don't have a compelling power of our own, if we're not, organized to take, and that is really the sort of animating idea behind the title of this book. You only get what you're organized to take. I should practice saying that title since we. And so, we, at the Kairos Center use this language of kairos. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that word, kairos, but the word is drawn from antiquity, from ancient Greece. And the ancient Greeks had two notions of time. They talked about chronos and kairos. Chronos was chronological time, just the normal time of the day, of the calendar, of the clock. And kairos was a particular moment when in biblical terms, the divine breaks into history, or in perhaps secular terms, it's a moment of opportune action. It's a moment when transformation is possible. And I think we really contend that this is a kairos moment. Kairos moments are when the old institutions and system of society are dying, they're breaking down. They no longer hold legitimacy in the lives of the majority of people in a society, and we definitely know that's true today. Like, we know that the dominant institutions of our society are no longer relevant in the lives of tens of millions of people. And new awakenings are also struggling to be born. And those new awakenings are both hold tremendous possibility and danger. I mean, the new awakenings can be things like fascism, right? I mean, the things that can come through a kairos moment can be worse than what was before. But if we're organized in a moment, like a kairos moment, then we can also bring forth real new hope and transformation. And that's really, I think, our contention in this moment, is that, beyond partisan politics, beyond the kind of language of division, which is so rife in our society right now, every time you turn on the TV or social media, you hear division, 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 and yet when you look at polling, like the numbers are really compelling. Like 70% of Americans believe in universal health care. 70% plus Americans believe that public housing should be expanded. 60 to 70% of Americans believe that public education needs to be expanded. And I think it's something like 73% of Americans believe in fair taxation from the wealthy to the rest of society. So how do we move that popular will into political action? And I think it's also our contention that it is in kairos moments, or during kairos moments, it's those whose backs are up against the wall and who have no choice but to push that can be the kind of spark that can ignite mass movements. And so we are really seeing all over the country, I'm sure it's true here in Binghamton, but it's true all over, that there are people who are compelled to take action, not because it's a matter of morality, but because it's a matter of survival. Like the networks of care that are being pulled together to support folks who are being rounded up and risk abductions by the state and deportations, like the networks of care that are coming together around food banks, around housing folks, the mutual aid societies, the local grassroots organizing. I mean, I don't know how many folks here were at the Hands Off protests over the last month. Like there's bubbling up, and then so many of the leaders who are taking action and caring for their communities in this moment are those who just have to take action, because otherwise it means death. Otherwise, it means the destruction of their communities. So for us, the task is how do we weave together these various networks, these various communities into a power that's greater than the sum of its parts. That's what a mass movement is. And so this book, that we wrote draws on lessons from previous movements of the poor and dispossessed of this country to try to help inform our thinking about what it's going to take today. So with that, maybe I want to just ask Liz, what do you think are a few of the key lessons from the book from your own history of organizing that you think, local leaders, community activists, organizers can carry with them in this moment?
So, to me, where we start when it comes to this question of lessons is what social force in society has in its actions the power to actually bring about a larger social transformation. And I think, for instance, if we look at history, when we look at social movements of the past, successful ones are led by those most impacted by the injustices that they need to solve as a matter of survival. And so when I look at some of the history of poor people organizing for the past 20, 30 years in this country, we have examples from the National Union of the Homeless in the 80s and 90s, poor and unhoused people in 25 cities across the country, organizing to the tune of 30,000 members, winning the right for unhoused people to vote, winning, the establishment of, housing programs, winning, other programs that are set up by the government towards accessing real affordable housing and allowing for unhoused people to immediately enter into housing programs. But probably most significantly, showing that poor and unhoused people could be homeless but not helpless, can have power and not pity, and making a connection between how I might be unhoused today, but every person is just one paycheck, one health crisis, one extreme storm, one other emergency away from homelessness. And so what does it look like for us to organize from the bottom up? What does it look like for us to build alliances, not in the places that we're different, but in the places where we can actually come together across lines of difference? And what's it going to take in terms of a commitment, a capacity, a consciousness, and connection to actually lift the load of poverty? And so I think starting there and then moving into work with welfare rights leaders who were actually the very folk who brought poor people's campaign demands to someone like Dr. King, who challenged other folks in the 60s and 70s to look at the crisis of poverty. Poor women of color organizing, again, the largest poor people's organization in history, who then inspired others, generations of people. That's part of how I got involved. I got recruited by the National Union of the Homeless. I got recruited into the National Welfare Rights Union. And here you have, poor and low income, predominantly women, especially women of color, who are coming up with some of the most powerful and visionary policy programs. Again, going back to something like the pandemic, folks, this child tax credit that people were, that really made a difference in people's lives, lifted millions of people above the poverty line. Only when it wasn't expanded and extended sent millions of people back under the poverty line again. That wasn't the genius of policymakers in Washington. That wasn't the kind of vision of the think tanks. That came from poor and low-income, poor women who said, what is it going to take for us to actually impact our lives and our families' lives and make a difference? And I think that sometimes we don't have this this kind of understanding, this insight of what I think Frederick Douglass talked about. Those in pain know when their pain is relieved. Those who would be free must strike the first blow, right? And so another example, another lesson of the best policy, the best programs come out of the organizing experiences, the lived experiences, the experiences of suffering, but also, as we call in our work, the plight, fight, and insight of poor and impacted folk. And then continuing on to like some of the best organizing amongst low-wage workers, whether it was the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Florida, who are some of the poorest workers, some of the folks that have been left out of the National Labor Relations Act, some of the folks that are not able, they earn a sub-minimum wage, who don't have protections to organize, don't have work with dignity, but who have been able to take on some of the biggest fast food corporations and grocery stores in the country and in the world, and won like very significant victories in breaking up indentured, debt bondage kind of slave rings, interrupting the mass kind of malpractice of all kinds of low-wage workers. And here again is a story, a lesson of si se puede. Like when we do it, we can do it. Like we can win, and it can happen in any kind of community, and it can happen around all kinds of issues, and that we can kind of find common cause. And so to me, some of those lessons are, if they've done it before, we can do it again, and that we can do it, with a power and a vision that actually kind of makes poverty history for everyone.
In the book, we have a whole chapter titled "The Battle for the Bible," and it might be a surprising chapter in a book about poor people's movements and poverty, but it really, for us, we understand this quote-unquote battle for the Bible as really central to the question of how power is held in this country and what it will take for those from the bottom of society to also gain significant political power. So I guess, Liz, I'm curious if you could help. You're an organizer, you're also a theologian, a biblical scholar, and a Presbyterian minister here in a Presbyterian church. If you could just kind of like unpack for us how you understand this question of the battle for the Bible. And in particular, like in this moment, we're seeing this like ascendant authoritarian movement, this rising fascism, and a very significant part of that is this emergent, powerful Christian nationalist movement. It's not the first time. I mean, Christian nationalism is woven into the history of this country for centuries, but we are seeing in this moment a particular way that Christian nationalists have built significant, widespread political power, and so much so that they have fully, taken over one of our two major political parties. So maybe it's a question both about the battle for the Bible and how you see Christian nationalism taking shape today, and what opportunities then do we have to actually fight back on the moral terrain, on the religious terrain?
So a really small and easy question is what you're saying? Yeah.
I've got a few more.
So I really appreciated this opening about like the immorality of the situations that we're living in. When we can end poverty tomorrow and we don't, like, that's not just an affront of our humanity. That's like an affront of like what it is to be a good person in society. And so I think it's really important to think about this. And so we start actually one of the chapters pretty early on in the book talking about some of the myths around poverty, but including this kind of myth that God somehow condones poverty and inequality and racism. And you know, there is a long history of religion, and especially Christianity, being used as a cover for the kind of use and abuse of the wealthy and powerful. You know, I think we started with this kind of beautiful acknowledgement of the land and of our ancestors, and you know, we know about this kind of doctrine of discovery and the kind of anathema of the kind of not recognizing the spiritual and religious traditions of First Nations and Indigenous peoples, and in fact, like battling out kind of a theology there. We know about enslavement. You know, that we've heard the Bible passages that were used to try to kind of prop up the U.S. chattel slavery system. I mean, there was this slave Bible. I've seen it when I visited Fisk University. It didn't contain the Exodus. It doesn't contain the prophets. You know, Jesus' inaugural sermon, you know, I have been anointed to bring good news, isn't anywhere to be found, right? Like, you know, literally slaveholders ripped out the core of the Bible and produced a Bible that tried to say, slaves, obey your masters. And yet, in that example, and in so many others, the abolitionists, the enslaved and formerly enslaved, didn't concede religion and the Bible to the slave masters. I mean, Harriet Moses Tubman wasn't like a cute nickname. Like she was a Moses of the people. Like and drew great inspiration, and not just inspiration, modeled that we have to have exoduses today still, or you know, in different moments of time. I mean, you know, like someone like Frederick Douglass had a quarrel with Christianity in the church, but it was a quarrel that was within Christianity. It was talking about, you know, he posed this challenge to Christianity of like, how can you talk about liberty? How can the Liberty Bell proclaim liberty across the land? A quote from Leviticus 25, and to then have this stain of U.S. chattel slavery, right? In the Black freedom struggles, you know, that continue. I mean, you had Jim Crow, you know, preachers. I mean, we in the process of writing this book, and it's included in one of the chapters, you know, this pamphlet that was distributed to millions of people at the height of Jim Crow, called God, the Original Segregationist, and like, you know, detailed, tried to retell Bible stories about how, you know, it wasn't just that we were supposed to have segregated, you know, lunch counters and bathrooms, but that in fact you were supposed to separate people from different parts of the world. I mean, you know, and in using the Bible to do so. And in my organizing life, almost a week, like almost not a week can go by where someone doesn't basically quote the Bible, whether it's those who do not work shall not eat, or the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer, or the poor will be with you always, or obey the authorities. I mean, there's lots of passages that are weaponized to hold up a system that has allowed for half of the U.S. population and a huge section of the world to absolutely be impoverished. But again, just like Harriet Tubman and folks that were organizing at other moments in history, I think one of the main arguments in this book and from our experience is that we cannot concede religion and Christianity in particular to those who would take it and use it to stay up late in their beds, like Micah 2 tells us, thinking about ways to hurt people, right? And that, in fact, this kind of battle of theology or battle for the Bible is actually a part of a social struggle to talk about what the Bible really says about justice and mercy and kindness and love and truth and freedom. And that, if you rip those concepts, if you rip, justice for the poor out of the Bible falls apart. And so, enter the moment that we're living in. What was it? 2 days ago, there's overtures to establish an office of anti-Christian bias, to overcome it, right? Like the problem that we're dealing with right now in this country is that Christians don't have enough, that rich, powerful Christians don't have enough influence. Or just when you look at the authors of something like Project 2025, actually a small political movement of people that call themselves Christians and Christian nationalists, in fact, who are the architects for the dismantling of all of these beloved social safety net programs that, as Noam was reminding us, are incredibly popular. But yet, we have, we've never had a kind of conservative Christian power structure be in as much power as folks are today. And I think it then begs the question of anyone that defines themselves as a person of faith, including and especially folks that consider ourselves Christian, and I call myself among them. What are we to do in this moment? And I think the Bible seems pretty clear, whether it's Isaiah 10 and woe to you who issue oppressive decrees. That sounds like that's happening every day, that deprive the poor of their rights, hurting women and making homeless children their prey. I mean, to me, that sounds like what we're living through right now. Or the wages you fail to pay your workers are crying out against you, James 5. Their cries have reached the ears of God. Or we can just kind of continue. I mean, just these prophetic critiques, are not some distant other idea. We should hear them in this moment and imagine what we're supposed to do. And it's not to fall in line with those who call themselves Christians, but are oppressing the poor and staying late in their beds at night trying to think about how to hurt people, and only preach bad news of eviction and hate and attacking trans kids, bad news of deportation and detention and cutting Medicaid, and not the good news of an end to poverty. And so I think that this is actually a really important part and a call to action, especially in a house of worship.
So there's always more to say, but I think Reverend Kim, we're in your hands. So you should just tell us what's next for the evening.
I just think it's hilarious when anybody thinks I should be in charge of anything. But we did invite some folks who have been active in the work in the Binghamton area for some time. And I'm looking and not seeing your daughter anymore. She just left. One of them was Corinne Kirk, who was the office manager for Senator Leah Webb, who wanted to be with us but couldn't tonight, but she's also Cynthia Kirk's daughter. And so there was a strong connection there. Leah came up in Binghamton and learned the vision that has carried her into the state Senate and has really represented for the people of our community. So we're sorry she's not here, but we do have Hajra Aziz, who is the Executive Director of the Southern Door Community Land Trust. And I'm going to call y'all out and invite you to come up, and anybody else who wants to come up, please do, because what I think we want to do is talk a little bit about one of the challenges that you laid out, which is in the book, which is you have to resist, but you also have to build something. And so where one of the places that we fall down in this community is we get some really good resistors who then don't know how to do anything else. And we get so used to pushing back that we can't always hear. So Hajra and Rebecca, if you're able, and because I sent her a note this week and said, oh, by the way, I might ask you to come up on the stage and join the conversation, and I don't even know if she got the note. And who else did I call? I can't even see people anymore. Nate? No. I promised Nate he wouldn't have to talk. He's here, but I promised him he wouldn't have to talk. Andy is here, but we don't want him to come up because he will talk. But I think the question for all of, I have an opinion about what is necessary in Binghamton to break down the silos to make more effective work, and that is, I feel really strongly that the most important thing we need to be doing is anti-racism work, because that colors absolutely everything else in the conversations we try to have, because we're so siloed. And we've watched over and over again, while good white people like me, you put me in charge of something and then I think I'm the authority. And that's dangerous, because the people who are the authorities are the people who are living with it, right? So, y'all come, let's talk a little bit about the work that you are doing, that we are doing, that needs to happen in our community. Rebecca is a city councilwoman and is like the voice of housing justice. But the two of them together are pretty amazing. And I feel like I forgot somebody, but like I said. And the reason I called you all up and said, will you please do this, is you all are people who come to this with a really deep vision and a really unique perspective, I think, on what needs to happen to move from where we have been to where we are going to be. And so I guess that would be my invitation is, tell us about that.
Okay. Oh, not a hot mic.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Good
Just have
evening,
to make sure
everybody.
that somebody up there sees which one you pick up.
Okay. So my name is Hajra Aziz, and I am the Executive Director for the Southern Door Community Land Trust. The Land Trust is the first and only BIPOC-led affordable housing organization in Broome County. And many good points came up this evening that made me reflect. The first was the opening of tonight's talk, where we paid homage and honored the rightful owners of this land. And so it made me think, when I first joined the Land Trust, the name of our Land Trust was actually the Broome Community Land Trust, BCLT. And so one of the first actions that I took as the executive director coming on board was taking a look at the language that we use in the work that we're trying to set out to do, and that we needed to spend some time thinking about the work we wanted to do, where we wanted to be, the future that we saw. It did not include being named after a colonizer. And so we did a little research. I was able to take a look back at the rightful owners of these very lands, and I found that the indigenous populations, the Haudenosaunee, and other, there's 7, right, okay. I found that they actually referred to this very area as the Southern Door. The string of mountains that we live in represented, as they traveled through the lands, it represented the borders, before borders were borders, where they would be crossing into other lands, which is now Pennsylvania. And so after thinking through that, I recognized that as we're trying to fight for ownership of land, as we're trying to push a movement that will serve low-income, predominantly, people of color, because this is a very racialized issue. Housing has its racist, issues baked in, that we needed to be looking at history as we were looking forward. So it was important to do both things. We realized in that discovery that if, as the folks who are doing, the land back movement, and rightfully so, we wanted to be seen as being on the right side of that work and that movement that was taking place. So as people of color, when it came to it, if we were able to have conversations with folks from the indigenous tribes that still exist very much around us, we wanted to be able to showcase our acknowledgement, our understanding, our being able to honor, their rightful ownership, but draw on more of the things that we had in common as far as people of color, and how we had been historically locked out of access to resources and power over resources, et cetera. And so that is when we changed our name to the Southern Door Community Land Trust. I don't get to tell that story often, so I was very excited that we were opening up tonight. So with that said, we changed our name. We rid ourselves of colonial kind of language, and we decided to do the work. It would have been great to jump in and just acquire all kinds of housing, because there's not enough blight and vacancy around us. But we came into fruition during COVID. We all know the world stopped, but we all know that the clocks that are attached to grant funding and things like that, those things didn't stop. And so we needed to be creative in how we were going to do anything in the community. And it turned out to actually be the best thing for us, because other land trusts have looked at our model and said, oh, we should have done it this way, right? Because many land trusts, because there are over 260 plus in the United States now. It's increasingly becoming one of the solutions for affordable housing. But we decided to do more education and empowerment. And what that looked like is working with folks, working with caretakers, working with the people who pay the bills, the people who are experiencing the transiency and the evictions, the people who are housing insecure consistently, constantly in this community. Bring them together in a form of building community with each other so that they can share their story, so that narrative storytelling, that indigenous action of sharing stories, learning from each other, and then weaving into those community building sessions, weaving in some educational components, some conversation around things like why the communities we live in look the way they do, because it wasn't like a magic wand and we all decided to be born poor, and we just decided to live on this side of town, right? We helped to kind of peel back some of the historical, makings of the streets that we live on, the communities that we live in, and also the communities that we are finding it hard to gain access to, right? So it's sort of like this invisible hand that kept pushing us to Susquehanna Street, so to speak. All of us are from this area except for a few, so we know. And we're like, well, I'm trying to get a house in Vestal. Why can't I get the green yard and the white picket fence and have my kids go to the school that has better resources? And so we helped people to put a name to that experience because they were living it and they were just trying to survive. And it was very eye-opening, when we would talk about like redlining and people didn't know what that actually was. And so we started with that, the empowerment. We call it our ambassador program. And what it does is, again, it just pulls, the adults in the community, the folks who are responsible for keeping us, keeping young folks, alive. You've got your littles here, right? So feeding them, clothing them, keeping them warm, all those things. And we wanted to just build on their lived experience. From that, we were able to develop the board that then became the folks who are running the nonprofit organization. So another thing that came up was the people who are doing the work, the people at the helm, should be the people who are going through these experiences, should be the people that have this lived experience with poverty and housing insecurity, et cetera. And so we developed our board from the ambassador program, which largely, without us knowing it, we were doing the right thing. We had no idea, but it turns out we were doing the right thing. And from that, we developed more programming because we thought we needed to be speaking with young people as well. They're the future leaders, and if we're having these conversations and we're developing, different, pathways of how to advocate for your own community, we can't be having these kind of conversations without young people. And so that came into developing what we call our Youth Story Corps, where working with young people was more developing their why should they care about this issue. And so increasing their understanding, again, that historical perspective, giving them some of that information, but also why should they care? They don't pay the bills. They don't have to find the home. They don't have to look at it through that lens. And so we wanted to talk with them about the impacts that it is having if your mom, your dad, your grandma, if we have to be looking for a new place to live 5 and 6 times in a year and move to 3 different schools as we're doing it. And so drawing those connections. But while we're having that conversation, we wanted to increase their skill sets as well so that they took away from our meetings skills that they could use in other professions. So that narrative storytelling turned into more of interviewing and how to develop, the more impactful questions, because maybe they're the folks that are going to be speaking to the mayor in a few years, right? And so helping them develop their voice and their power of voice. And then we wove in some other skills, photography and filmmaking. We developed documentaries, one called Housing in the Time of COVID, and another titled Housing is a Human Right, which we firmly believe that housing is a human right. And so where this has taken us is we continue to do the education and empowerment while we're trying to do the business of business, finding the grant money, acquiring properties so that we can develop the first permanently affordable housing units in this area. And what we see that as being is offering housing, looking at the income, where folks are, what people are being paid, and closing that gap between what we understand as the poverty level that HUD and all these other geniuses put together, and we close the gap, right? Because we have to make it make sense. And then we weave out or throw away the metrics that then become those punitive measures, like, okay, well now you're making $1.50 more, and so now you can't live in this apartment, right? So because we are people with lived experience, with access to housing, low income, low paying jobs and things of that nature, we have had experience with these services, social services and HEAP and NYSEG, and just how all of these things miss each other like ships in the night when it comes to making connections. And so, with that knowledge, it's going to help us develop systems that will work for people who are experiencing these things. So we're closer than we've ever been before. We don't have housing available, but we have 2 projects that are coming along the way. We have more and more friends in higher places because we've had the opportunities to network and share our stories and connect with the people who are newly elected, and we're trying to be a part of the changing of the tide because the tide is changing. So we are consistently doing that, and once we unlock certain monies, then we will be providing those units to families with children in Broome County that are consistently struggling to find affordable, safe, energy efficient, resilient, beautiful, and dignified places to call home.
I think one of the things that has been so compelling about the Southern Door Community Land Trust Ambassador Program, you mentioned the education, the empowerment. It truly as well has provided a platform for those ambassadors involved, not just in advocacy, but in sharing their story and in connecting. And I think that, for me, is what comes to mind when I consider what's ahead of us and what needs to change. So you've driven policies, you've driven programming by folks who are in it, who have lived through it, but their opportunities to share their story as they're advocating, I think, has so often connected the dots for folks who have either never had any exposure themselves or even been exposed to others who are experiencing extreme poverty, whether it's food insecurity, housing insecurity, all of the above. And I'm asked often, I've worked in the homeless services sector for just under 20 years now. I speak about the scope of homelessness locally, its sources, its solutions. And so I can share the data, I can talk about City Council's current 4-part housing policy strategy. I've developed programming, but I think it's most important to focus on that we are never going to end homelessness until we can see those experiencing it as human. And the dehumanization that is so pervasive, certainly now, but it's not new, and the ways in which we other each other, That's what's so powerful about the work that you're doing. I engage often with nonprofits, and yours is the model that I point to, because there's traditionally within the nonprofit sector, and it was mentioned earlier, we tend to come in with our expertise that we learned at college and that we read about in books, and decide that this is what you folks need to do to make things better, rather than gathering those who are in it and saying, what is your experience? What would make it better? What can be done? But it's that connecting and that community building, that power shifting. I mean, we started there tonight. That's what so much of this is about. We can only organize when we can see each other as human. And we can only connect when we have the capacity to, the capacity for empathy, the capacity to want to know each other's experiences, the capacity to be willing to learn from those who we're sitting in a room with, even if we don't agree on everything. The coalitions that we need to build locally to shift power, and that we need to build nationally to shift power, have to include every sector. One of the things I would say I'm most excited about, the Binghamton Tenants Union just had its first open meeting, and I'll say first open meeting of its most recent iteration, because this is, I think, our third iteration of the Binghamton Tenants Union, which also formed just before COVID locally. Our second iteration, we focused a lot on how we could fix things for tenants, the services that essentially we approached it as case managing what some tenants' rights education, certainly, but what could we fix? This most recent iteration, we've been really intentional, and there are others in the room who have driven that, Eric, Nate, certainly, who have driven this, from the beginning, but this effort not only to build a structure where we're identifying how we engage with each other in the space, what our values and priorities are, and how we're going to work to empower, not case manage, but how we're going to empower. So our focus, and what we spent a lot of time on this last Tuesday in our open meeting, is helping tenants understand the value of organizing, and that it takes getting to know their neighbors. Not much more than that. Knowing their rights, absolutely, but getting to know their neighbors, talking about their experiences, and then driving that next step of what can we do collectively to shift the power between ourselves as tenants who are relying on the landlord who has accumulated the property and is holding it over them. How can we shift that power? So that's one of the things I'm extremely excited. I would put Southern Door Community Land Trust absolutely on the list of things that are moving locally that I'm excited about. Binghamton Tenants Union as well. I think we're seeing a movement among, I'm not sure I can say unhoused folks yet, but street outreach groups who are working directly with folks who are unhoused have been coordinating since November, more so than they have ever in the past, or at least in my 18-year tenure. Not only have we seen significant increases in homelessness locally, but particularly of those who are unsheltered. So we're seeing increases in encampment sites. Binghamton City Council in August passed a local law that expanded the protected class, or expanded Binghamton's human rights law to include unhoused status as a protected class. What we've not gotten a handle yet on is exactly how to enforce that law. We're working closely with legal services. We've had several reports of, for example, harassment at encampment sites, not being able to gather their belongings. So it's something that I would say we're doing carefully. We certainly don't want to we want very similarly to ensure that folks who are currently in it and are experiencing the trauma of what it is to not have a home are involved in the movement. We're also trying to stay cognizant of not putting them at further risk. So that's building. We just finalized a contract today to bring a street clinician training to the team, so that'll be happening in the next 6 months. We'll be working to prepare more to support our unhoused folks. So I would put that as something that I'm certainly excited about seeing as well.
See if I can get this one to work. Oh, but we have so many.
You really do.
I need to get a sense of the meeting because it is 12 minutes after 8, and we had said that we were going to go until 8. On the other hand, we didn't start until 15:15, so we're coming up on exactly the amount of time we said we were going to spend. But we just got to the good stuff. So how would you feel if we agree that we're going to continue to have the conversation and invite you all to ask questions or to share insights and all that other stuff for the next, say, 17 minutes? And then Phil Westcott is here someplace, and he's going to lead us in some songs. Oh, and also Wes McNeil is here. O'Neill. McNeil. I knew it was an Irish name. Is going to lead us, is going to do the Come to Jesus, not the Come to Jesus. This is an ecumenical gathering. She's going to... Anyway, what do you think? Should we keep going? All right. So, it says on the schedule that this is supposed to be interactive dialogue, which means that I need to take at least one of these handheld mics down, and we need to, and Becky is, actually we've got several people, it looks like, who are ready to be mic runners. Talk to us. Tim. Here she comes.
Hello, my name is Tim Walcott. I'm a long-term member of the Poor People's Campaign and very proud to see you back here again at this church. My question is to the results and the lessons learned from the 30 million poor people who were developed into becoming voting mass. How did that turn out? What was learned from that? Thank you.
Tim, it's good to be with you. So a third of the electorate are poor and low-income people. It's like really kind of the largest unorganized voting block that nobody pays any attention to. And I think one of the things we really saw from, all right, it's gone. It's like a little storm. I mean, I think what we saw in this election season was another election season where poor and low-income voters were completely looked over. In the Poor People's Campaign, we did kind of mass texting and reaching out to folk. You know, I think in many places it had an impact in terms of, because no one is talking to poor and low-income voters, when you reach out to folk, it can make a difference. It does make a difference. And I think that this kind of idea that we can kind of wake this sleeping giant of poor and low-income voters, and that this can actually make all the difference in terms of shifting the entire political calculus of the country, is beyond true. And when we look at the election kind of turnout, more people did not vote in this election than voted for either candidate. And so on the one hand, if Trump is going to try to claim a mandate, it does not exist. About the same amount of people voted for him as when he lost 4 years ago. But I think what it shows is that our electoral politics are completely out of sync with the issues that really matter to people. And we don't have candidates, and we don't have a political system that is actually in line with the needs and demands of people. And so, I mean, it makes a difference then how we proceed to try to build the kind of power that it's going to take to shift the priorities of the nation. And I think we want to suggest that when you add everyone that voted for Kamala Harris to everyone that did not vote, to actually a section of folks that probably did vote for Donald Trump, but voted almost as a protest vote, that things aren't okay, that you're talking about a huge mass majority of the country who when united across all the lines that divide us and pulled into a united force are exactly what makes it possible for us to have housing for all, have health care for all, and end all forms of poverty and discrimination. But we're here. And it's not a good place to be. And so it to me sends a message that we have to organize, so as to be able to kind of pull people together, and organize people together, and develop this kind of compelling power that can change everything.
I think I would just maybe add, so organizing in terms of the electoral piece, certainly agree the disconnect is clear. One of the threads that I think is important to point out is that regardless of, yes, the electoral piece is and can be meaningful, policies absolutely impact daily lives. If we're organizing to build that collective power, truly regardless of who holds positions in electoral politics, who's been elected, and I realize I'm saying this as an elected official myself, but that was never the goal. Kimberly's giggling. The goal when it comes to bringing people together should absolutely be that we're shifting power collectively regardless of who is in power. And that can be such a meaningful component to those conversations, because we're going to continue to have community members who want nothing to do with elected officials or the policies that we talk about. I mean, we flipped city council 2 years ago. and have a fully democratic, extremely people-focused, community-focused, driven by things like housing for all and addressing other insecurities and inequities, but we may or may not get a second term. So regardless if we're looking long-term, then we're building communities, we're connecting in neighborhoods around shared experiences and shifting power from that perspective.
Hi. Whoa,
It's working now.
it's really a lot. I gotta hold it out here. Anyway, my name is Doug. I live in Binghamton. I work at Binghamton University. And I guess I'll start with my national question. One of the things that seems to have come up across the board is that it's really important that Christianity, religion generally, plays a role in empowering people. And I know, of course, that Christianity has real potential for that. And as someone who attends this church, I believe in that. I worry that on an international level that there's a Christian movement that also has a long history that very much teaches people not to. I'm thinking of the Word of Faith movement. I'm thinking of a vastly popular movement which is dwarfing a lot of mainline Protestant congregations. And I'm wondering how you see that fight, how you see that battle with prosperity gospel thought, and really, because that also is a movement that means an awful lot to a lot of people who are impoverished in this country as well and has an appeal. That was my question for the authors here tonight. And my other question, the local question for Executive Director Aziz, I'm saying this in part because I can't remember your first name, but I'm wondering if you've made any, this might be a foregone conclusion, but made any outreach to the university. I know there's a group that doesn't even have a website yet. It's NAIS, or Native American and Indigenous Studies, and it's a relatively new group. And I also, there are fellowships available for students for community projects at the university through Harper Edge, which is, might be worth looking into if you haven't already. Thank you.
Do you want to do the national thing first, or? So for the local question, my first name is Hajra, and so we have connected with the university. I adjunct with the university. I'm kind of mired in. I went back and became a student again. I have no idea why. And so I'm connected, right? And I've connected with Center for Civic Engagement, and I've connected with other professors where we've done some work with students who are kind of weaving it into kind of like the syllabus. But some of the ways in which I've approached it is as a longtime resident of Broome County, who until I went to BU for my undergrad, never really looked at Binghamton University. I always had this, it always seemed unattainable. So then once I got in the inside, then I kind of felt like, okay, well now I'm in here, I gotta do something, and I gotta get people to understand the impact that the university is actually having on the very issue that we're talking about when it comes to housing. And so one of the things, I've connected with my own students in having conversations around how these issues, whether they are aware of it or not, the town being developed to service incoming students, et cetera, and kind of getting them to understand how they can get involved in giving back in the time frame that they're here getting their education, because many folks are going to get their education and leave. And so I've done what I can do in those small circles. I've not heard of the group that you mentioned. I'd love to connect with them. But we have done, we've taken that connection with the Center for Civic Engagement, who's then kind of connected us to like interns that are being paid from the state level, which is great for us because we're like a one-man show over here. And so we need that kind of support. So we're looking always for volunteers, and largely the conversation is when I'm within that university's walls, some student is getting an earful on what it is that this whole situation and how it's servicing them is having a long-term impact on families and children. And so how do we use your time wisely while you're here to get engaged with the community? So I'm always open to do more of it.
So who's better to answer this question, the agnostic Jew or the biblical scholar? But I'll take a shot at it. You know, remember when I was talking about this like concept of Kairos moments and old institutions dying and new ones kind of emerging? I mean, that's true in organized religion, nationally and internationally. I mean, we know that like church attendance and the life of like mainline Protestantism is slowly or not so slowly dying in this country. The same is true in other faith traditions as well. It's true in Jewish communities. The largest growing Christian populations in this country and in the world are evangelicals and Pentecostals. I mean, there's also like 1.2 billion Catholics in the world. And as more crisis strikes across the world and as more mass migration is forced, that also means people will be bringing their traditions with them. So I think we can expect in the coming decades that evangelicals and Pentecostals in the US will likely increase even more significantly. I just wanted to share two like interesting facts or stats that I heard recently. One was, and this was came to us from an organizer who's deeply embedded in evangelical communities in the country. He said that the largest growth in churches over the next 10 years will be new churches that don't currently exist. And those churches will be speaking to the spiritual, political, and economic or material concerns of the people that will be attracted to those churches. And so there's one challenge for I think the Christians amongst us, which is who's going to be planting those churches? Is it the Christian nationalists, or is it, a movement of Christians who believe in love, mercy, compassion, and equality, and abundance for all? So that's one task that I know some of our colleagues have been deeply kind of wrestling with. The Kairos Center has a spiritual and political home we call the Freedom Church of the Poor. It meets every Sunday online. You all should join if you're so moved. It's not just a Christian space, though it is often uses the theologies and traditions from Christianity as sort of a base. And we've imagined, like, what would it actually look like for there to be freedom churches all over this country as some of those new churches that emerge over the next decade. So that was one set. The other, which I found really fascinating, I was talking to a political scientist a couple weeks ago who studies religious trends in this country, and she said that or maybe I'll ask this question, who do you all think are the most politically active religious group in this country? Let me just shout out a guess. Evangelicals. So it's interesting, demographers actually count atheists as a religious group, so that would be number one. We're going to put them to the side for a second. The second most, or the first really, most politically active religious group in the country is progressive and liberal Christians. But they don't move their activism and political activity through institutions primarily. They move it through individual action and individual activism. But by raw numbers, it's liberal Christians who actually take the most political action in their communities, are the most politically active on social issues. But evangelicals including liberal evangelicals, absolutely. Overlapping, Protestants and evangelicals. And a small number of far-right evangelicals have been able to move significant power because they move their power through organization, through significantly resourced and networked institutions. And so there's a similar question, I think, for liberal Christians, evangelicals, and Protestants of how to move from individual action to collective action, how to move from, small individual acts of political activity and activism to building organization. And that can be through churches, it can be through parachurch organizations, it can be through community organizations. But so there's a task there and a challenge, I think.
Can I add one thing?
Oh, please.
Please. So as I'm sitting here and I'm hearing this part of the conversation, it's me as a person of Islamic faith. There seems to be kind of like not enough space being created for interfaith in this conversation. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. That is something that is an ongoing challenge because Christians are really good at talking to each other, and Jews have had to learn to talk to Christians a lot. The social justice perspective that Islam brings is a very powerful force in Binghamton and in our society. And you got a bunch of Presbyterian ministers here. Sorry, but you're right. We do need to create that space more intentionally, and I thank you for calling us to that. Reverend Wes McNeil is, I'm reading right off the Kairos website, the New York State Labor Religion Coalition Program Director. They are ordained in the United Church of Christ and have over a decade of experience organizing with community, faith, and labor organizations across New York State. This is like coming home practically, isn't it? Because you went to Ithaca College and Cornell, all of that stuff. So, and they are going to give us the call to action that is the survival revival. Come on up.
All right. Whoa. All right. You can hear me, I think. Thank you all for staying and engaging in conversation and for coming out. We are really excited to continue to connect with you here, and hearing from you all, really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna just say a few things pretty quickly. So this is basically stop 2 on this tour that we are on. We are hitting up places in upstate New York over the next few days, but then we're gonna be, not me personally, but Kairos is gonna be on the road all over the country. And this is not just a book tour, this is an organizing tour. Because as we've been talking about, we need to be building up the collective power that is absolutely necessary to building the kind of world that we need and deserve. And so we want to stay in touch with you. And so my maybe biggest call to action is if you didn't get signed in or registered, please do that so that we can stay in conversation with you. We're gonna send some of the things that we mentioned here out to you via email, and we wanna be in touch with you. And this tour around the country is building towards what we're calling a survival revival. And we're trying to meet folks and plant the seeds to come back to places throughout the country. And kind of what we talked about, we know that folks already are being compelled all over this community and the state and around the country to take action in all kinds of ways. Some of that action looks like making sure that people have something to eat, making sure that people are connecting around their shared struggles around housing, organizing to win legislation. That's happening all over the country already, and we know that as conditions continue, unfortunately, to deteriorate, that's going to be happening more and more and more. And what we need is a movement that lifts up and connects those struggles. And so that's what we're talking about with people all over the state and country as we go from here. And we want you to be part of that. And we want the things that you're involved in right now to be part of that. We want the things that you're gonna find yourself compelled to do in the coming months to be part of that. I can mention really quickly just a few things. We certainly have things through the Cairo Center and Labor Religion Coalition and the networks that we're a part of that we can plug you into if you're looking for a way to get engaged. One of the things that I work on is New York statewide organizing. Grab one of these at this table over there if you're interested in getting involved with a campaign around addressing child poverty in New York State, which is one of the highest in the country. And New York State actually passed a law a couple years ago saying that the state was going to commit to cutting child poverty in half. We are, maybe not surprisingly, not on track to doing that, but that law is still on the books, and we have some structures that we can really organize around. If you want to learn more and get involved in that, there's an organizing call that you're all welcome to join on May 15th. So that's one way to get connected, and there are many others that we can share. But if you haven't yet, feel free to stop by the swag table over there, buy a book if you haven't yet. And if you are in a position to help support the organizing work that we're doing, we would really appreciate whatever you're able to give. The t-shirts and everything are a suggested donation. Really, whatever you're able to offer is great. And we also have some signs here where we're in, if you want to stick around a couple minutes more, to write down what you're organizing to do. And take a picture, post it on social media if that is the kind of thing that you do, and tag us, and we want to keep this conversation going. I think that's basically what I have. Am I missing anything? All right, thank you all so much again.
I got a text from Phil that said, I will only be playing a couple of songs. I am running into Lucian's bedtime. Lucian is turning 3 in June and is a very live wire. The fruit does not fall far from the tree, but Phil is a singer, a songwriter, sax player, guitarist, miscellaneous in Binghamton, and he's really good-natured about going with the flow when I say, Phil, I need you to do something, but I'm not exactly sure what it is yet. So I'm going to keep babbling until he gets his music stand sorted out. Yeah, we're going to get down so we can see you.
Hi, I'm just going to sing a couple quick songs. I was going to do a few, but as mentioned, yeah, I'm sure that my son is keeping my mother very busy right now, but I'm very worried about the 10-minute drive between her house and my house, and when he falls asleep in his clothes. But this first one, everybody knows, will probably know at least the chorus to these songs. This is Which Side Are You On?, which is written by the great Florence Reed. I just want to say something real quick while we're talking about colonization and all that stuff. Pete Seeger is a wonderful ethnomusicologist and folk singer, but he did not write most of the songs that he sang, and it's really important to look back at the history of where those songs came from. Which Side Are You On is particularly written by a woman who was who's both her husband and her father were workers in Harlan County's mines in the early 1920s when people were actively being shot and killed for being union members. So. Oh, come all you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? My daddy was a miner, now he's an errand son. He'll be with you fellow workers till the battle's won. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Across this great old nation, tell me, what will you do when there's one law for the rulers and one law for the ruled? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab or will you fight the man? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Don't scab for the bosses or listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on now? Which side are you on? Also, I borrowed the third verse from Tom Morello's, who's the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine's cover of that song, because it deals with more than just Harlan County in the 1920s, which was it's a really cool song. Anyway, I am just going to close off with We Shall Overcome, so if everybody would join me in that, and I'll shout out the next thing as we go through. So I think everybody knows how this song goes, right? So we're all going to sing together? Yeah. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I still believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Deep in my heart, I still believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I know I still believe we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I know I still still believe that we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I know I still believe we are not afraid today. One last time. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I still believe that we shall overcome someday. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thanks for coming up tonight.